I want to switch gears here a little bit and talk about open source libraries. It's kind of all the rage these days. I guess from my perspective, it's definitely one thing that AppSec programs ought to deal with. How do you think about improving open source security?
I mean, it's an easy problem to solve. It's just nobody wants to. I mean, it's there's challenges, right? I think the easy way to solve this, right, is that you have a internal repository that is managed by your company that goes through a very robust approval process where only these 15 libraries are ever used in any of your products. That's not realistic, right? It just doesn't. Software doesn't get made that way. So there are ways to be able to identify vulnerabilities in third-party libraries, through your secure software development lifecycle, through the tooling that you have in place. But one of the things that I think we sort of miss is that identifying, as I mentioned, identifying vulnerabilities is easy, right? We can do that. It really comes down to what's your response to that. And so, if you have a third-party library, many of us probably remember Log4j, 2 years ago, where, we have this 0 day, everyone freaks out. And it really comes down to those that didn't freak out knew that, okay, we have a process in place to get this resolved in production in a relatively quick way, or we feel comfortable that we can monitor for this, and we know we're going to get through this. So I think that, the challenge is not just identifying those vulnerabilities, but it's really what is your response to that. You're going to have 0 days. You're going to have libraries that are running in production that are not vulnerable today, but are vulnerable tomorrow. What is your response to that?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. It's not a terrifically complicated problem, but you do have to have some infrastructure and you have to have some process in place to manage it. And as you mentioned, most library vulnerabilities certainly are not exploitable. I think people are saying, roughly 90% are not exploitable. Certainly, we've measured it with contrast that at least 62% of open source libraries are never loaded. They're never even get into memory. So that's like an easy way to chop off a big chunk of the problem.
And just to kind of piggyback on that, going back to the Log4j situation, I mean, for those of us that were involved with that, you find out that the percentage of where you were actually exploitable in that was very small. It wasn't 100%.